Howdy partners, it's so good to be here again, as always. I finally got to watch The Brutalist, a film that I've been very excited to see since day one. You can immediately tell from that first teaser that there's something very special going on in this film, and I kind of loved that that teaser didn't give anything away from the plot itself. It just ignited this mystery that I had to go check out. And of course by today we know that this film has 10 Oscar nominations, which is phenomenal, and I imagine that it will be taking quite a few awards home roughly a month away from now. But no matter, that is neither here nor there. As always with every film, I just mind wipe myself of all the hype that exists around it. I love to give every film the same benefit of the doubt and just enjoy my time at the cinema as always, to just be present in the moment and to just open the doors and windows of my soul to just let myself be inspired, learn something, and hopefully be surprised. But there's no question that I was very eager to see this film in particular. Even if I am a little bit late to the party, it is a little hard to fit this gigantic 3.5-hour film into my schedule. And incidentally, that is the first and only question that my colleague at work asked, who is also interested in watching this film. He asked, how do you feel about the length of the film? And frankly, it went down super smooth. It did not feel like a 3.5-hour film. If I were to make a comparison with a film like Eraserhead, which I watched last weekend, that is an 87-minute film, and it was the most excruciatingly long 87 minutes of my life. Good God! Don't get me wrong, it was an amazing film, but this in comparison goes down a lot smoother, all things considered, even if it is a very challenging and daunting film in many ways. And yes, it does help that there's an intermission halfway through the film. Admittedly, I was surprised when the intermission came, like, oh, we're halfway through the film already? Cool. But I did appreciate the fact that we had a countdown displayed on screen. And not only was it useful for basic functional reasons of just taking a little pee break, obviously for such a long film, but I did find it to be a very narratively potent moment to pause the film, because it did in some way mirror the feeling of Laszlo, who had to wait a little bit longer until he could finally reunite with his wife. So yes, this is a giant film, and it is an epic film, but not in the usual Hollywood sense of the word. Here the story starts off in a post-World War II world, where our protagonist, Laszlo Toth, renowned architect from Hungary, who is visibly traumatized with the shadows of the horror of the Holocaust baked deep into his soul. The entire intro sequence of the film was stupendous. We start off in this ferry that's arriving to the United States, and there's a lot of conflicting emotions just bunched together all at once. We have this sentiment of horror, confusion, fear, anticipation, euphoria, and this sense of enigma as well, just entering into this brand new world. And a rather upside down, out of balance world too. As we see in the film's poster and teaser, we see the Statue of Liberty either upside down or to the side, never upright in its normal position, which makes for a hell of an opener in a very metaphoric, poetic way of kickstarting the journey of this film. So our visionary architect has arrived in America, and he has to rebuild his life piece by piece from the very bottom. It's not always an easy journey, but eventually he does kind of have an opportunity to prove himself, to once again start creating things. He starts off small, but eventually he does have an opportunity to do something a little bit more grandiose, notably this library, which is absolutely beautiful, and me being the bookworm that I am, I was very, very, very happy and enchanted to see how this library would turn out. Even if you're not a student or a connoisseur of architecture, I think it's rather impossible to walk away from that library without this deep feeling of awe and intrigue. We've never seen anything quite like it before, and there's this luminosity and this ingenuity and this functionality that is so unique and never before seen. It's quite marvelous, and it is interesting to see how the reaction to this library is in the film. But putting aside the architecture for a moment, I find that this film is much more a character study than anything else. Here we are presented with an in-depth look of what it is like to delve deep into the mind of a visionary artist. We get to peel back the onion layers and see what is at the very hard core of this beauty. Yes, there is a deep conviction and discipline in regards to his work, and the end results are without question worthy of reverence. But nonetheless, Laszlo is a very flawed man, and I'll leave you guys to discover just exactly how. But it is interesting to consider the title of the film, The Brutalist. It's not just talking about the architectural style, which it most definitely is, but The Brutalist can also be attributed to Laszlo himself, and then to some other characters too in the film. It is curious how the film's title works on several layers. And after having seen the film, there's one moment in the film that really stands out in my mind, and it truly is one of the most remarkable scenes in the film, where Laszlo is explaining his vision, philosophy around the question of why he chose architecture, and he's explained this to wealthy industrialist played by a brilliant Guy Pearce. And the finale of that monologue just left me floored. In fact, everyone in the theater kind of had this like, oh my god reaction. It's quite rare to have that happen in the cinema, so I'm glad that we were all on the wavelength. And even Guy Pearce's character was like, wow, that was an incredibly poetic way that you answered that. And we were all in agreement, like, yeah, that was incredible. It is fascinating to me to see how his monumental construction in the film, where most of the film is surrounded around that one piece, I do find that it very much mirrors his soul. There's this incredible use of light in his building here that feels very spiritual, magical, and a little too art house for some folks, I imagine. But there is once again this beautiful function and this purpose and discipline behind each and every square meter of it. But by that same token, there's this incredible darkness and this almost subterranean depths and these shadows that are imbued into the very fabric of its stone. By the end of the film, I feel that this darkness reflects the rot in his soul, not just inside his soul, but also just the way that America and the way the people in America are influencing him negatively. And I do find it as a very appropriate symbol for the tyranny and control of Harrison's character, the man who commissioned this preposterously ambitious project, on the top of a hill of all places. This monument on top of this hill feels like a tomb, a mausoleum, memorializing that corruption. Yeah, I do love how the metaphors work on several layers in this film, and I feel like I'm just starting to unpack the onion layers of this film. There's a lot to digest, as you can imagine, in this kind of gigantic film. And it is interesting to consider how the construction of this building is also a physical manifestation of the eternal conflict between art and commerce, which is very much mirrored in this dynamite performance between Adrien Brody and Guy Pearce in their respective roles. There's this constant pressure to change, alter, and adapt to norms, at least so-called norms, in the face of this truly visionary genius who is trying to do something unique and monumental. And even though in many ways he has the right of it, he's not always easy to work with. In fact, he can be absolutely impossible to work with at times, even with the best of intentions. But there's no denying the haunting beauty of his craft. And that word craft, we should just bold, italicize, double underline it, because the visual craft of this film is simply outstanding. I mean that from every facet of a film production standpoint. This is easily one of the most inspiring cinematic experiences of the year. All the period appropriate assets such as the costumes, the makeup, the grime, the dirt, and of course all the props and the set decoration are perfectly immersive for the time periods. And I also deeply appreciate the detailed look we get into the construction of these buildings, whether it would be that monument on the hill, the library, or even something as basic as a chair. It was quite beautiful and in many ways educational to look at. And I do love these montage shots that were edited rapidly together in these rapid fire bursts of the entire process. And I have to say, it is simply shocking, if not astounding. Take whatever adjective you want. All that to say that I couldn't believe that this film has a budget below $10 million. That is insane. This is a film that looks like it's well over $100 million in budget. Talk about bang for your buck. Especially considering that this is once again a 3.5-hour film. And when it comes to the performances in the film, the cast from top to bottom just give knockout performances. Not just in the principal roles, of course, which they are fantastic and I will be talking about in a moment, but even in the smaller roles, they each serve their purpose in remarkable ways. A personal favorite for mine is the performance from Rafi Cassidy, who plays Zsofia, who has a near wordless performance throughout the entire film, yet manages to have a lot of emotional weight. But of course, when it comes to the main cast, Adrien Brody gives a career best performance. I know he's already won an Oscar before, so I wouldn't put it past him winning a second one here, and I don't think anyone would complain too much. Not only does he show a mastery in his craft as an architect, and he nails the Hungarian accent as well, but I think the part that really stands out the most in my mind, at least at the moment, is how he conveys this tortured soul of a genius artist. There are several moments where I feel like he's on the brink of tears. Oftentimes throughout his performance, I feel like we're just getting something from the very depths of his soul that's rising to the surface. A very complicated and powerful character that he navigated with minute nuance. A landmark performance by all degrees. Then we have Guy Pearce, who played Harrison, the wealthy industrialist, as I mentioned before. And I've always loved Guy Pearce. It's been a minute since I've seen him on the big screen. I can't recall at the moment what was the last film I saw him in cinema. So it was refreshing to see him have such a powerful and magnetic character. Another very complicated character where the actor absolutely nailed the performance. And then of course we have Felicity Jones, who plays Laszlo's wife, Elżbiet. And when we finally do actually meet her, because it takes quite a while, she was not what I was expecting. And I don't mean that in a bad way, of course. I think she adds a fascinating layer of human complexity to this drama, and I deeply appreciate this fierce independence that this woman has. Another standout performance. Seriously, the whole cast was amazing. And before I forget myself, the music in this film was simply wonderful. Oh my god. I know I'm showering praise on every facet of this film, but it's kind of one of those films. But seriously, beautiful composition. I'm simply in awe with what I experienced from the music. So yes, even after having successfully washed all the hype away from my body, mind, and soul, I walked out of the cinema absolutely stunned from this film. If there's one point of criticism that I could bring up from the film, it's in the last leg of the film, specifically in regards to the epilogue. There are quite a few vibe shifts in the film, and I think they work quite well, but here I think they're taking it a step too far. I think if that entire final sequence would have been removed from the film, I think that would have been perfectly okay. I love everything else leading up to that moment. And of course, I'm not saying this is the worst ending ever in any film. Far from it. But I do think it's kind of overextending itself and a little bit over-explaining itself. I think ending on this kind of mysterious question mark would have been very appropriate for this film. But otherwise, this was an incredible film. I'm ranging from a 9 to a 9.5 out of 10. Much like Laszlo's architecture, I feel like this is a film that is built to outlast all these frivolous, morally and artistically depraved Hollywood productions. All the money, action, and explosion in the world cannot compare with this titan of a film that explores the human soul and visionary artistry like no other film this year. It is without question one of the most challenging and ambitious films of the year, and even though it has a 3.5 hour runtime, it just breezes by. If that is not the definition of a great film, I don't know what is. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. Take care and talk to you soon.